What if the man Hollywood labeled as lazy, reckless, and indifferent was actually one of the most disciplined, intelligent, and morally complex actors of his generation? What if the persona itself was the greatest role he ever played? This is the real story of Robert Mitchum, a man arrested on live television, written off by the studios, and expected to vanish. Instead, he became one of the most enduring legends in American cinema. But who was he really? And why did almost no one see the truth while he was alive? The death that shaped everything. On February 20th, 1919, Mitchum's father was crushed to death between two railway boxcars while working as a switchman in South Carolina. Robert was just 18 months old, far too young to understand loss, yet destined to live within its shadow. His mother, suddenly widowed and pregnant, struggled to keep the family afloat. Jobs were scarce. Homes were temporary. Stability vanished before Mitchum was old enough to remember it. The world he inherited was one of uncertainty, quiet desperation, and constant movement. So here's the first question worth asking. How does the death of a father before a child can even shape the man he becomes? For Mitchum, loss did not create fragility. It created resistance. It forged a personality that rejected authority, distrusted permanence, and refused to depend on anyone. By his teenage years, he was already clashing violently with teachers and administrators. He fought classmates, challenged authority figures, and refused to conform to the rigid expectations placed upon him. Schools expelled him repeatedly. Discipline had no effect. Punishment only hardened his resolve. Eventually, his own mother made a heartbreaking decision. At 14, she packed his suitcase, made him a sandwich, and sent him away. Not because he ran from home. Because home had nothing left for him. What happens to a child who learns so early that survival depends entirely on himself? Does independence become strength, or armor that never comes off? A child of the Great Depression. From 1931 onward, Mitchum became something rare today, a real American drifter. He rode freight trains across the country, clinging to steel ladders as landscapes blurred past. He slept in hobo camps beside strangers who measured life in meals rather than years. He learned how to steal food, avoid police patrols, and endure cold nights without shelter. He worked wherever work could be found: coal miner, dishwasher, farm laborer, ditch digger. Each job demanded physical endurance and offered little reward. Each hardship shaped the quiet toughness that later radiated from the screen. He also became a professional boxer. 27 fights. A broken nose. A scarred eye. Endless bruises. The heavy-lidded gaze that would later become his trademark wasn't an artistic choice. It was damage, the physical record of survival. Violence taught him control. Hunger taught him patience. Hardship taught him observation. And when hunger became unbearable, he did something few celebrities ever admit. He would walk into a police station and intentionally get arrested just to secure a warm cell for the night. What kind of actor learns about life inside jail before learning how to act? What kind of performer studies humanity not from scripts, but from survival? Perhaps this was the foundation of Mitchum's later power on screen, an authenticity that could not be taught, only lived. The chain gang escape. In 1933, at just 15 years old, Mitchum was arrested in Georgia for vagrancy. The sentence was brutal: 180 days on a chain gang. The reality was worse than the sentence implied. Leg irons cut into infected flesh. Men collapsed from exhaustion. Disease spread unchecked. Prisoners endured 12-hour days in mosquito-infested swamps, building roads for a single meal and the promise of eventual release. The experience etched itself into his psyche. Authority was no longer abstract. It was a physical force, capable of cruelty without explanation. Then came the moment that could have ended his life. While working on a road detail, his leg shackles were temporarily removed. Mitchum waited silently, studying the guards, measuring the distance to the trees. When a distraction came, he ran. Gunshots cracked behind him as he sprinted into the forest. Branches tore at his skin. Breath burned in his chest. He did not look back. He survived. Barely. Years later, he would return to the same region as a celebrated film star, admired, photographed, applauded, yet technically still a fugitive from that chain gang. How do you reconcile those two identities, prisoner and icon? How do you live with the knowledge that freedom itself once depended on outrunning death? You don't escape such experiences. You carry them. They become part of your presence, the quiet tension behind the eyes, the controlled stillness that suggests a man who has seen more than he says. Hollywood and the reinvention of a drifter. When Mitchum eventually found his way into acting, he brought with him something Hollywood had never quite seen before. He did not perform toughness, he embodied it. He did not pretend to understand danger, he remembered it. In an industry built on illusion, his authenticity was unsettling. Directors noticed his calm, almost effortless screen presence. Co-stars observed his minimal preparation, mistaking his quiet confidence for laziness. Critics described him as indifferent, detached, even bored. But was it indifference or mastery? Mitchum rarely rehearsed because he had already studied life itself. He delivered lines with casual precision because emotional truth came naturally to him. His stillness, often mistaken for apathy, was in fact intense control. What if the persona of the careless actor was itself a defense, a way to protect a deeply disciplined mind from intrusion? The arrest that should have ended him. In 1948, everything seemed to collapse. Police raided a cottage in Laurel Canyon and arrested Mitchum for smoking marijuana. The press had been tipped off in advance. Flashbulbs exploded as officers led him away. Headlines spread across the nation. At the time, such scandal was catastrophic. Hollywood carefully constructed moral images for its stars, and any deviation invited exile. Mitchum served jail time. Studios distanced themselves. Public condemnation was swift. His reputation was destroyed. Or so everyone assumed. Instead, something unexpected happened. His next film became the biggest hit of the year. Audiences applauded his defiance. His popularity grew rather than diminished. His co-star, arrested for the same crime, disappeared from the industry forever. Same charge. Same sentence. Different outcome. Why was Mitchum forgiven while others were erased? Was it charisma? Authenticity? Or did audiences sense that his rebellious image reflected a deeper truth rather than manufactured scandal? What does this reveal about society's relationship with morality and myth? Who decides which figures are condemned, and which are transformed into legends? The masterpiece nobody wanted. In 1955, Mitchum accepted a role that would define his legacy, a murderous preacher in The Night of the Hunter. The film was dark, unsettling, and unlike anything audiences expected. Mitchum's performance, chilling yet strangely hypnotic, blurred the line between evil and charisma. His character spoke softly, moved deliberately, and radiated menace without raising his voice. At the time, the film failed at the box office. Critics dismissed it. Audiences rejected it. The director, Charles Laughton, was so devastated by the failure that he never directed another film. Yet Mitchum always insisted it was his finest work. And hidden behind the scenes was a truth few recognized. He quietly guided the child actors throughout production because Laughton struggled to direct them. He adjusted performances, shaped emotional moments, and ensured the film's coherence, all while maintaining his public image of effortless detachment. The man accused of laziness was secretly holding the entire project together. How many people conceal their dedication behind a mask of indifference? How often do we misjudge quiet competence as apathy? The philosophy of effortless strength. Mitchum's public persona was carefully crafted, though he rarely admitted crafting anything. He spoke slowly, answered questions with dry humor, and dismissed his own achievements. When praised, he often shrugged. When criticized, he remained unmoved. But beneath that surface lay intense discipline. He read widely, wrote poetry, and possessed a deep understanding of human psychology. He studied the rhythms of speech, the subtleties of silence, and the power of restraint. His acting philosophy was simple: do less, feel more. He believed truth emerged not through exaggeration but through presence. His characters rarely displayed emotion openly, yet audiences sensed enormous internal conflict beneath the calm exterior. Was this approach born from artistic theory, or from a lifetime of suppressing pain in order to survive? The persona as performance. Perhaps the greatest mystery of Mitchum's life was the boundary between the man and the myth. He cultivated the image of a rebellious outsider, a drifter who stumbled into success, a star who didn't care about fame. He joked about his own scandals and dismissed Hollywood's seriousness. But what if this persona was deliberate? What if the rebellious image protected a deeply thoughtful, disciplined individual from public scrutiny? If the world expected recklessness, he provided it. If critics labeled him indifferent, he allowed them to believe it. The mask became his shield. And here lies a fascinating question. Is a persona any less authentic if it is consciously created? Or can the performance of indifference itself reveal deeper truths about identity and survival? The legacy of a survivor. Robert Mitchum's life cannot be reduced to simple narratives of success or scandal. He was a man shaped by poverty, violence, and loss, experiences that forged resilience but also complexity. He understood suffering intimately. He distrusted institutions. He valued independence above approval. These traits defined both his life and his art. When audiences watched him on screen, they sensed something genuine, an authenticity rooted not in technique but in lived experience. His performances carried the weight of real hardship, real danger, real survival. Perhaps that is why he endured when others faded. So who was Robert Mitchum? Was he the reckless rebel the press portrayed? The disciplined craftsman colleagues quietly admired? The wounded survivor shaped by early trauma? Or the brilliant performer who transformed his own life into his greatest role? Maybe he was all of these at once. And perhaps that is why almost no one saw the full truth while he was alive. Because the real mystery was never simply the characters he played on screen, but the man who mastered the art of playing himself. And that leaves us with one final question. If a lifetime of hardship teaches a person to wear a mask so convincingly that the world mistakes it for reality, where does the performance end, and where does the true self begin? The secret poet. This is the revelation that changes everything. Long before Hollywood discovered him, Mitchum was already building a private world of imagination. He was a published poet at age 9, not merely scribbling childhood verses, but crafting structured works that revealed startling emotional depth. What could drive a child toward poetry so early? Was it loneliness, restlessness, or a desperate attempt to understand a chaotic world? He wrote plays, composed music, devoured the works of William Shakespeare and Joseph Conrad in the crowded tenements of Hell's Kitchen, where noise, struggle, and poverty shaped daily life. While other children fought in the streets, Mitchum wrestled with language, meaning, and identity. Books became refuge. Words became armor. By 22, he had already crossed paths with artistic greatness, collaborating with Orson Welles on a musical production staged at the Hollywood Bowl. The meeting of two restless creative spirits hinted at a different destiny, one not defined by tough guy roles, but by artistic exploration. He possessed a photographic memory and could memorize scripts with astonishing speed. Yet his approach to performance was unconventional. He marked lines with a simple N, meaning no action needed, believing silence often spoke louder than dialogue. What kind of actor chooses restraint over display in an industry built on spectacle? What kind of performer trusts stillness more than speech? Even Frank Sinatra once remarked that Mitchum knew more about music than anyone he had ever met, an extraordinary statement from a man who defined American popular music. And yet, Mitchum told the world that acting was merely making faces and saying lines. Why would someone so gifted pretend not to care about talent? Perhaps because caring made you vulnerable. And vulnerability, to someone shaped by hardship, could feel dangerous. Was this humility, deflection, or a carefully constructed shield? The tough guy who was actually tough. The legend of Mitchum's toughness was not invented by studio publicity departments. It grew from real events, sometimes shocking, often unsettling. In 1951, he became involved in a bar fight with a soldier who was later revealed to be a world-ranked heavyweight boxer. Against expectations, Mitchum knocked him out. National headlines followed, reinforcing the image of a man who lived the roles he played. But the roots of that toughness ran deeper. Before fame, his life included chain gangs, boxing rings, and endless street fights. He had been arrested as a teenager for vagrancy and reportedly endured brutal conditions while serving time. Survival demanded resilience. Weakness invited danger. In another widely circulated incident, he reportedly flattened 3 U.S. sailors in a foreign bar. On a different occasion, he allegedly threw a disruptive crew member into San Francisco Bay during a heated confrontation. Were these stories exaggerated by Hollywood mythology? Possibly. But even exaggerated legends reveal something essential: a reputation earned through lived experience rather than manufactured image. Yet the question remains, was this violence an expression of his true nature, or simply a defense mechanism forged by a harsh upbringing? Was he aggressive by instinct, or protective by necessity? The legend wasn't fake. It was simply incomplete. The roles he refused. Perhaps the most revealing measure of Mitchum's character was not the roles he accepted, but the ones he rejected. He turned down the title role in Patton. He declined the lead in Dirty Harry. These decisions were not about money or scheduling conflicts. They were moral choices. He explained that he did not want to participate in films that glorified violence or celebrated cruelty. He believed certain stories shaped public attitudes in dangerous ways. Cinema, to him, carried responsibility. How many actors at the height of their careers turned down iconic roles because of ethical concerns? How many willingly sacrifice fame to protect personal principles? Instead of taking the role himself, he recommended George C. Scott for Patton, arguing that the character required a level of passionate intensity he did not possess. This was not indifference. It was artistic honesty. And yet the paradox deepens. A man known for playing hardened criminals and antiheroes refused roles he believed promoted violence. Was this contradiction, or evidence of a deeply considered moral code? The calypso singer nobody expected. At the height of his fame as a film star, Mitchum surprised the world by recording a calypso album. Later came a country album. Then he wrote and starred in a moonshine film that helped inspire the television series The Dukes of Hazzard. Why would a Hollywood star risk his image by exploring such unexpected creative paths? Was he restless, curious, or simply uninterested in limitations? His musical work was not a passing novelty. One of his songs later inspired Bruce Springsteen, whose own storytelling style echoed themes of struggle, identity, and American life. The man who claimed to possess no talent left artistic influences that endured for decades. How often do we believe people when they insist they are ordinary, even when their achievements reveal extraordinary ability? How often does the world accept modesty as truth rather than disguise? The marriage that outlasted everything. Behind the public persona existed a relationship that revealed a different side of Mitchum's character. He met Dorothy Spence while recovering from injuries sustained during his time on a chain gang. He was 16. She was 14. Their bond formed not in glamour, but in shared vulnerability. They remained married for 57 years. Through fame, through scandal, through personal struggles, including affairs and alcohol, through the relentless pressures of celebrity life. In an industry where relationships often dissolve under scrutiny, their partnership endured. What sustained such loyalty? Habit, forgiveness, or a profound emotional connection that survived even betrayal? Near the end of his life, Mitchum reflected on his many romantic encounters and concluded, "There's not one of them worth lighting a candle beside her." When he died in 1997, there was no grand memorial service. No elaborate Hollywood tribute. His ashes were quietly scattered at sea by his wife, exactly as he had requested. A life lived in spectacle ended in simplicity. What does this reveal about the man behind the myth? Did he reject public display because he valued privacy, or because he believed truth existed only beyond the spotlight? The mask he never removed. Perhaps the most fascinating aspect of Mitchum's life was the persona he carefully constructed. He hid intelligence behind apparent laziness. He concealed sensitivity behind indifference. He masked morality with humor. He buried poetry beneath silence. The sleepy-eyed tough guy image, the relaxed voice, the detached demeanor, the aura of effortless cool, functioned as a fortress. It protected a complex inner life from public intrusion. Why build such a barrier? The answer may lie in his early experiences. His father's death. His childhood poverty. His imprisonment as a teenager. A world that repeatedly taught him that exposure invites pain. Hollywood marketed Robert Mitchum as a man who didn't care. The truth may be far more unsettling. He cared too deeply. And caring, for someone who had known loss and hardship, required protection. The psychology of reinvention. Mitchum's life raises deeper questions about identity itself. Can a public persona become indistinguishable from the private self? When an individual performs a role for decades, on screen and off, does the performance eventually become reality? For Mitchum, the boundary between actor and character often blurred. His effortless screen presence reflected genuine experience. His emotional restraint mirrored personal philosophy. His detachment masked intense perception. Was he performing toughness, or revealing it? Was his indifference authentic, or an act refined through years of necessity? Perhaps he understood something fundamental about human nature, that identity is not fixed but constructed, shaped by circumstance, experience, and choice. If so, Mitchum's greatest performance was not any film role. It was himself. The legacy of contradiction. What makes Mitchum enduringly fascinating is not simply his success, but his contradictions. A violent man who valued peace. A rebellious spirit with strict personal principles. A global star who sought anonymity. A poet disguised as a tough guy. These contradictions do not weaken his story, they define it. They reveal a personality too complex for simple explanation. And perhaps that complexity explains why audiences remain captivated decades after his death. People recognize something familiar in his paradoxes, the tension between who we are and who we appear to be. How many individuals hide sensitivity behind strength? How many conceal intelligence to avoid attention? How many construct identities to survive environments that demand conformity? In this sense, Mitchum's story is not unique. It is universal. Final question. So now that you know the deeper story, which part changes how you see him the most? The chain gang survival? The secret poetry? The roles he refused? Or the marriage that lasted longer than most careers? Because once you see the man behind the mask, it becomes impossible to unsee him. And maybe that is the real lesson of Robert Mitchum. Sometimes the strongest people pretend not to care, not because they are empty, but because they are protecting something fragile inside. And perhaps the most enduring mystery is this. When a person spends a lifetime perfecting a mask, does the world ever truly meet the face beneath it, or does the performance become the only truth anyone will ever know?